He thought it was just a coin toss, heads or tails. But that single moment on the sidewalk led him into the homes of the dead, the secrets of the broken, and a partnership with a thief who would later try to destroy him. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels stale no matter how many windows you open. Daniel Brewer stood on the cracked sidewalk of East 17th, hands jammed deep into the pockets of a jacket that had seen better winters. His shoelace was undone, but he didn't care. A paper coffee cup trembled in his right hand, half full, already lukewarm. Across the street, two paths. Left, toward the bank, another interview, another fake smile, another polite rejection. Right, toward nothing in particular, maybe the park, maybe nowhere. He sighed. Then, like it was a game he used to play as a kid, he fished a quarter out of his pocket. Heads, he'd go left, tails, right. It flipped, caught a flicker of sunlight, and slapped down on the back of his hand. Tails. He turned right. The decision felt childish, even stupid, but there was something freeing about letting fate decide. He walked past rows of half-closed shops, some dead, some dying. On 12th, a handwritten sign taped to a dusty window caught his eye. Help needed, cash paid daily. The letters were jagged, black marker on yellow cardboard, the kind of sign you'd normally ignore. But Daniel paused. His resume, full of college degrees and internships, was in the other direction. This, whatever this was, wasn't in the plan. Still, he knocked. A moment later, the door cracked open. A bald man in a grease-stained apron peeked out. "You here for the sign?" "Maybe," Daniel said. "What is this place?" The man shrugged. "Salvage, we clean out foreclosed houses. You got boots?" "No." "You got hands?" "Yes." "You start now." Daniel stepped inside. The smell hit first: mildew, old wood, sadness. He followed the man past shelves stacked with box cutters, gloves, trash bags, lock picks. No waivers, no forms, just work. By noon, he was breaking down furniture in a two-bedroom apartment that reeked of dog urine and broken dreams. An old woman's photo album sat on the floor. Faces smiled at him from the 70s. He almost tossed it, then paused. What do we do with personal stuff? The guy, whose name he'd learned was Rick, shrugged again. Trash it unless it's worth anything. Jewelry, cash, coins, electronics, keep. We split. That night they'd found $3,000 in rolled-up bills inside a faux Bible. Rick laughed like it was Christmas. Daniel didn't. He stood there, holding the money like it was radioactive. "She probably forgot it was there," he muttered. Rick's face darkened. "She probably stopped paying her mortgage and ran, or died. Either way, the bank owns this crap now." That night Daniel didn't sleep well. The next morning he went back anyway. It kept happening. Houses blurred into one another, cracked photo frames, baby clothes, unopened letters, the smell of abandonment. Rick taught him how to spot things that mattered. "People hide money in stupid places," he said. "Freezers, toilet tanks, picture frames." It wasn't noble, but the money was real. By week 3, Daniel had nearly $4,000 in his backpack, and a creeping guilt he couldn't shake. His fingers had stopped trembling when he pulled wedding rings off nightstands. One morning, they entered a faded yellow house in a cul-de-sac that looked like it hadn't been touched since 1983. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and something sourer underneath. In the back bedroom, Daniel opened a drawer and found a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, a pearl necklace and a letter addressed to Margaret. He opened it. The handwriting was neat, almost painfully so. "My dearest love, I know I never deserved you. If you're reading this, I've gone, and I pray to God you forgive me." Daniel stopped reading. The words clung to his ribs like cold hands. "Hey," Rick called from the kitchen. "You find anything?" Daniel stared at the letter, then at the necklace. It was probably worth hundreds, maybe more. He slipped both into his coat pocket and said, "Nah, nothing." Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scratched across the sidewalk. Daniel looked up at the sky, but it offered no clarity. He wondered, was this what selling your soul felt like? Daniel didn't tell Rick about the necklace or the letter. He couldn't. Something about that note, its raw, shaking honesty, lodged in his throat like a stone. That night, he laid them both on the table in his apartment, stared at them like they were evidence in a trial. He didn't know if he was the accused or the judge. He tried to sleep, couldn't, so he opened the letter again. I never gave you the life you deserved. I was too angry at the world, too weak to become the man you believed I was. But this necklace, it was my mother, and hers before that. If you choose to forgive me, keep it. If not, pawn it. Spend the money on something that makes you feel alive again. It ended simply, always Walter. Daniel folded it neatly and placed it back in the box. He didn't know who Margaret was, but somehow she mattered now. The next morning, Rick was already waiting by the truck, biting into a gas station donut, powdered sugar caking his fingers. "You look like crap," he said. "Dream about dead people." Daniel climbed in silently. His hands were still sticky with memory. They drove to a new address, a ranch-style place on a hill, foreclosure notice taped to the front. Neighbors peeked out from windows, tight-lipped and suspicious. Rick didn't care. He popped the lock like a magician. Inside it was chaos. Toys strewn everywhere, walls painted with little handprints. The family had left in a hurry. Cupboards still stocked. A birthday banner drooping above the living room fireplace. "Happy 6th, Kayla." Daniel's throat tightened. "Start with the bedrooms," Rick barked. "People always leave good stuff under kids' beds. Don't ask me why." In the master room, Daniel found a shoebox filled with crayon drawings and 2 gold earrings taped together in a plastic bag labeled Mommy's Wedding Day. He touched the bag, then backed away like it might burn him. He didn't take anything from that house. Rick noticed, "You going soft now." Daniel looked at him. "Doesn't feel right." Rick scoffed. "You think the bank's gonna care if we skip a few mementos? This isn't charity work. This is survival." But Daniel had already started seeing things differently. Not just rooms or boxes. Lives. Echoes of people who once argued over dinner, laughed on worn-out couches, danced barefoot in kitchens. The kind of wealth that didn't fit in a pocket. That weekend, Rick offered him a cut of a big find, antique coins lifted from a house with ivy crawling through its foundation. Said he could flip them through a guy downtown for double. Daniel refused. Rick squinted at him like he was a stranger. "You get religion or something." "No," Daniel said quietly. "Just tired of feeling like a grave robber." That Monday, he didn't show up for work. Instead, Daniel stood outside a brick building with a dented green awning, wills and probate, Robertson and Lee, attorneys. Inside, he met a woman in her 60s named Alina, whose silver hair was pulled tight in a no-nonsense bun. "I want to return something," he said. "It might belong to someone who used to live on Belrose Drive." She was skeptical at first, but when he handed over the velvet box and letter, something shifted in her expression. "Walter and Margaret Hughes," she murmured. "I handled their estate. She passed last winter." Daniel swallowed. "I thought maybe a daughter, grandkid, somebody might want it." Alina nodded slowly. "She had a niece. Lost touch years ago, but leave it with me. I'll find her." As Daniel stood to leave, she said, "Most people don't bring things back, especially not pearls." "I took too much already," he muttered. Outside, the sun felt different, warmer, less like judgment. But that peace didn't last. Because 3 days later, Rick showed up at Daniel's apartment. And he wasn't alone. Rick didn't knock. He never did. He banged on the door like a debt collector, then let himself in the moment it cracked. Behind him stood a kid in a puffer jacket. Couldn't have been more than 20, wiry, acne-scarred, with a gold tooth that gleamed like a warning. Daniel blinked. "You brought backup." Rick laughed, but it was the kind that had no humor in it. "Thought maybe you grew a conscience. Had to see it for myself." Daniel didn't answer. He stepped aside, letting them in. The kid's eyes scanned the place like a crow, calculating. Rick dropped into a chair, spreading his legs wide. "So, you returned that necklace?" Daniel stayed standing. "Yeah." "To who?" "A lawyer, said she'd find the family." Rick's jaw tightened. "You gave away 2 grand in pearls to some office hag." "They weren't mine." Rick snorted. "You think any of it's ours? That's the point. We take it because no one else will. Daniel crossed his arms. Maybe I don't want to take any more. Silence, a moment stretched too long. Then Rick leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low. You think this ends clean. You walk away and the dirt slides off. Daniel held his stare. I'm not scared of you. You should be, Rick said. Then turning to the kid, show him. The kid reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, turned it around. Photos, dozens. Daniel holding a crowbar in a bedroom. Daniel stuffing bills into his backpack. Daniel walking out of houses with things in his arms. You been keeping tabs on me? He asked, shocked. Insurance, Rick said. You start acting noble, I start protecting my interests. Daniel felt cold all over. What do you want? Half the coin sale, from the antique stash you turned down, Rick smirked. I moved it anyway, made a killing. You get a taste if you play nice. Daniel shook his head. I told you I'm done. Rick stood, wrong answer. The threat wasn't loud, that made it worse. The quiet was heavy, predatory. But Daniel didn't flinch. Get out. For a second it looked like Rick might swing, but then he smiled, small, dangerous. You think being good saves you? We're all in the mud, Danny. Some of us just figured out how to swim in it. Then they left. Daniel locked the door after them and leaned his forehead against the wood. He had underestimated Rick. He always thought the man was just scavenging, not scheming. Now he had evidence that could ruin him. That night, Daniel did something reckless. He drove back to one of the first houses they'd cleaned out together, a blue-sided home with peeling shutters. It had been empty then. Now it was occupied again. Lights on, laughter inside. A new family, a new start. He sat in his car, engine idling, wondering if redemption meant undoing what he'd already done, or just refusing to do more. Then he saw it. In the rearview mirror, Rick's truck, parked across the street. Not moving. Watching. Daniel didn't go home that night. He drove for hours, no direction, no music, just the low hum of the road and his heart pounding like a war drum. Rick was watching him. That wasn't paranoia. That was fact. The next morning he parked in front of the legal aid office where Alina worked. The street was quiet, but his nerves were. When she saw him, she smiled gently, then saw his face and frowned. I need to talk, he said. Inside, she made coffee without asking. Daniel didn't touch it. Instead, he laid out the story. The cleanouts, the stolen items, the stash of photos Rick had, the threats. He expected judgment, maybe even to be reported. But Alina just sat back and listened. When he finished, she said, Why tell me all this? Because I think you're the only person who might not hang me for it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you want to make it right. Daniel nodded, but I don't even know what right is anymore. Alina tapped her fingers against the mug. There's a woman I know. She runs a recovery nonprofit, helps families who lost everything: fire, eviction, fraud. You might not be able to undo the past, but maybe you can repurpose it. Daniel blinked. You want me to what? Donate? No, she said. I want you to work. The nonprofit was called Second Nest. It operated out of a warehouse near the river, stacked with used furniture, bedding, clothes, all labeled and organized with military precision. Volunteers came and went like ants, retired teachers, students, single moms, ex-addicts. Daniel started slow, moving boxes, making deliveries. The first time he helped a woman set up a mattress in her new one-bedroom apartment. The mattress he'd helped recover from an abandoned building 2 months prior. He nearly cried. But Rick hadn't gone away. One night Daniel found a white envelope wedged in his apartment door. No note, just photos, more of them, and a single word scrawled on the back. Talk. He met Rick at a bar on 9th and Harper. Dark wood, sticky floors, jukebox broken. Rick was already half a beer in. Been thinking, he said. I got a job lined up, big one. Real estate guy defaulted on his side home. Safe in the master closet. Word is 10 grand in cash. You and me, one more hit. Then we walk. Daniel stared at him. What part of I'm done don't you get? Rick leaned in, eyes narrowed. The part where you're poor, still in that same crap apartment. still driving that rust bucket Honda. You think you want out, but deep down, you miss the rush. Daniel didn't answer. Rick smirked. You know what I miss, not worrying about bills, not looking over my shoulder every time I buy something nice. Daniel stood to leave. Then Rick dropped the hammer. If you don't come, I burn you, full stop. Photos, names, dates, even that lawyer lady. You'll go down alone. Daniel clenched his fists. Rick leaned back smug. Be at the warehouse Sunday morning, 6 a.m. sharp. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Sunday came fast, too fast. He showed up at the warehouse. Rick was already there, gloves on, crowbar in hand, smile like a wolf in church. The house was isolated, no neighbors for 100 yards. Getting in was easy. Rick knew the alarm codes, probably bribed someone. Inside, Daniel felt his chest tightening. Rick found the safe. Give me a hand. Daniel stared, then moved forward. He was shaking, because in his coat pocket was something new. A hidden mic. Daniel had never worn a wire before. The tech had felt flimsy, fragile, like his entire plan could short-circuit from a sneeze. Aliner's friend from the DA's office had set it up in silence, just a look between them that said, "You're either brave or stupid." Probably both. Now he was crouched next to a floor safe in a stranger's bedroom, sweat dripping down the back of his neck, listening to Rick curse and pry open someone else's life. "You're too quiet," Rick muttered, getting cold feet again. Daniel forced a chuckle. "Just don't want to break anything valuable." Rick glanced at him sideways. "That ever stop you before?" The crowbar screeched, the safe popped. Inside, bundles of cash, a small pistol, and a deed. Rick's grin spread like oil. Jackpot. Daniel reached into the safe, his hands trembling. "This guy, you think he's really not coming back?" Rick shrugged. "Probably off crying to his lawyer or the Caymans. Either way, this house is toast." Daniel palmed a stack of bills. His fingers brushed the pistol. It sent a chill up his arm. Then Rick said something that flipped Daniel's stomach. "You know, I almost felt bad about that Hughes lady. But you were right, those pearls. Worth way more than we thought." Daniel froze. Rick kept going, voice casual, cold. "Told the fence they were from my grandma's estate. He bought it. Made me wonder what else we left behind in those old houses." Daniel turned to him, eyes sharp. "You took them back?" Rick smirked. "Of course I did. Waited a few days, broke into the lawyer's office. You thought I'd let some crusty clerk give away a payday." Daniel felt something collapse in his chest. The letter, the box, gone. "You're a thief," he whispered. "A grave robber." Rick straightened. "Don't pretend you're not. Only difference is, I don't lie to myself about it." And just then, headlights. Two sets, bright, blinding, tires screeched outside. Daniel's mic buzzed in his ear, the tiniest sound, and Rick caught it. His face twisted. "What the hell is this?" Daniel stepped back. Rick lunged. They crashed into the dresser. Lamp shattered. Rick's hands clawed at Daniel's coat, yanked the mic wire free. "You wired me," he hissed. "You little rat." Outside, boots pounding, shouts. Rick turned, bolted through the kitchen. Daniel scrambled up, chasing. He could hear sirens now, loud and wailing, justice closing in. But Rick didn't run far. As he reached the back door, he skidded on the tile. The crowbar flew from his hand and he slipped hard. Daniel saw it in slow motion, Rick's head cracking against the counter edge. Then nothing. Silence. By the time the cops burst in, Daniel was on his knees, hands raised. Rick survived barely. He was charged with multiple counts: burglary, possession of stolen property, and obstruction. The photos he'd taken of Daniel were found in his truck, along with stolen IDs and tools from at least 5 past jobs. The pearls were gone, the letter too. Sold, vanished, drowned in some shadowy fence network. Daniel testified it wasn't clean, it wasn't easy, but it was honest. And then came the call. Alina, voice shaking. "We found her." "Who?" "Margaret's niece, Evelyn. She's local, runs a daycare. I told her about the letter," she cried. "Said Walter used to write her stories when she was a kid." Daniel sat down, overwhelmed. She wants to meet you. He almost said no. But something in him, maybe the part that still believed in redemption, whispered yes. The daycare Evelyn ran sat behind a modest gray house on a quiet suburban street, the kind of place where toys littered the front yard and wind chimes clinked gently in the breeze. Daniel parked out front, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He had no idea what he was supposed to say. When she opened the door, she looked nothing like he imagined. Younger, maybe late 30s, auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes that had clearly seen both joy and grief. She smiled softly, the kind of smile people offer when they're not sure what's coming next. "You're Daniel," she said. He nodded. "You must be Evelyn. Come in." Inside, the living room was filled with children's books, sippy cups, and a scent of cinnamon-something baking. It felt like life happened here, loud, messy, unapologetically real. They sat on a couch that squeaked when he moved. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, "Eleanor told me what you tried to do, with the pearls, the letter." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how else to make it right." "You didn't have to try," she said gently, "but you did." He looked up. "I didn't save them. Rick stole them back, sold them." "I know, the police told me." She paused. "But the fact that you tried, that matters more than you think." Daniel swallowed. "I read that letter. Your uncle," he sounded like someone who hated who he'd become. She nodded. "He was a drinker, a mean one. My aunt stayed with him too long, but she loved him. That letter, I wish she'd read it before she died." Daniel hesitated. Do you want me to tell you what it said?" Evelyn smiled. "No, I want to believe it was beautiful." They sat in silence for a while. A child laughed from another room, chased by something imaginary and wonderful. Evelyn leaned back, eyes distant. "You know," she said, "I think people like you and Walter, you carry more guilt than most. Because you know when you've crossed a line, some people don't even see the lines at all." Daniel almost laughed. "Yeah, I used to think I was just surviving. Turns out I was making excuses." "Sounds like you stopped." He nodded. "I'm trying." She turned to him. "That's all anyone can do." 2 weeks later, Daniel was back at Second Nest, carrying a couch up 2 flights of stairs for a single mother and her toddler daughter. The woman cried when she saw the bed frame, said it was the first time in 2 years her kid wouldn't have to sleep on the floor. That night, Daniel sat in his apartment, still small, still drafty, and looked around. He had $30 in his wallet, a half-eaten sandwich, and a heart that hurt less than it used to. Then his phone rang. It was Eleanor. "I've got news," she said, "big news." He could hear the excitement in her voice. "What is it?" She laughed. "You remember that coin collection Rick sold? The buyer turned out to be a collector. He heard about the trial, wanted to verify provenance. Turns out those coins weren't just antiques. They were rare mint errors, worth over $100,000. Daniel blinked. "You're kidding." "I never kid about six-figure assets." He sat back. "So what happens now?" "Well," she said, "Rick's assets are frozen. But since you turned state's witness, and since you refused your cut during the theft, the DA is pushing for restitution." "To me?" "To Second Nest, in your name." He didn't know what to say. "Daniel," Eleanor said, "they want you to help run the fund, allocate resources, expand operations. They want you to lead." Daniel gripped the phone tighter. "You sure they want me?" She smiled on the other end. "You're the only one who earned it." 6 months later, Daniel stood beneath the rusted overhang of what used to be a meatpacking plant. The same place Rick once taught him how to break down furniture and hide valuables in hollowed-out microwave ovens. Now the place buzzed with hammers, voices, forklifts, the birth pains of transformation. The Second Nest expansion project, funded by coin money once stained with greed and regret, was becoming real. And Daniel, he wasn't just lifting couches anymore. He was writing checks, interviewing families, training volunteers. He still wore work boots, still rolled his sleeves, but now his name was on the foundation's board. The same hands that once rifled through strangers' drawers were now passing blankets to evicted mothers, helping teenagers pick out chairs for their first apartments. He wasn't rich, not in the way the world measured it, but his name carried something he hadn't tasted in years: respect. One Friday afternoon, he was sorting through a pile of donated dressers when a man approached. Mid-40s, button-down shirt, cautious expression. He introduced himself as Thomas, an estate attorney. "Mind if I ask you something strange?" the man said. Daniel wiped his hands. "Sure." Thomas pulled out an envelope, a single photo inside. Rick, younger, happier, holding a fish beside a man who looked like a mirror 20 years later. "He was my brother," Thomas said. "I heard what happened." Daniel's stomach tightened. "I didn't know he had family." "We were estranged. I left, he stayed. We didn't talk for years." Daniel didn't know what to say. What do you tell someone whose brother tried to ruin you? But Thomas didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I read the court transcripts," he said. "You could have buried him, but you didn't." Daniel nodded. "I didn't want revenge, just truth." Thomas looked around the warehouse, the volunteers, the children playing with donated toys, the signs that read dignity first above every exit. "He never had this in him," Thomas murmured, "but I'm glad you did." He started to walk away, then stopped. "He mentioned you once in an old email," he said. "Said you were raw but smart. Said you reminded him of himself before the bitterness." Daniel didn't respond. He just watched the man disappear into the sun. That night Daniel walked past the park on 17th, the same one he nearly turned into instead of taking the coin toss path. He sat on a bench, pulled a coin from his pocket. Same quarter, same dull shine. He spun it between his fingers. He thought about Margaret, about Walter, about Evelyn, Rick, Eleanor, about the house with the birthday banner, the mattress for the toddler, the woman crying over a donated dresser. A flip of the coin had started it all, but it wasn't luck. It was choice. It always had been. He flipped it again. This time, he didn't even look where it landed. He just stood up and walked forward.